Why do you like Pocketcat? It's obvious, isn't it? He's a tall, charismatic gentleman with a handsome grin. He's your best friend. He's always got a funny tale to tell, or an interesting observation. You'll never be bored around him. It's not all sunshine, though. The Pocketcat has his quirks. He can be pushy and even rude when denied his pleasures. And for his pleasures, well, he's quite fond of children. You can consider that a warning for the topics we'll be discussing today, by the way. Pocketcat is the most disgusting character in the Fear and Hunger games. The worst from many of the games I've played, in fact. He's anti-human in almost every way one could be. So, I ask again, why do you like Pocketcat? Far from civilization for, well, it's not entirely accurate, but let's call them heroes, travel to the dungeons of fear and hunger to rescue, interrogate, or kill the imprisoned warlord Lagarde. The dungeons were said to be bad, but are actually far worse than anyone could imagine, and the nightmares within threaten to tear apart their bodies and minds. But the worst monster in that dungeon is one that's out of place. Waiting patiently below the prisons is the Pocketcat. He doesn't attack or threaten you. In fact, right away you two hit it off and become the best of friends. Such is your bond that he decides to ask you some personal questions and share what's on his mind. Living humans are divided into two groups, yes? There are children of light, those destined to walk under the bright sun. Even in the darkest hour, they can feel the warmth of their loved ones in their heart and gain extra courage from that. Then, in the opposite end of the spectrum, there are people of darkness. Those humans who are often driven to depression and sorrow because of life's peculiar ways. But they have learned to live with those feelings. In fact, they have grown to love the ever-pressing darkness within. Which one are you? Well, which one? Are you a person of light or darkness? If you're here, then, well, I suspect there's only one answer. I suspected as much. I am glad you were able to be so honest with me. Tell me, do you love me by chance? Well, right. So, you really aren't a human of darkness. You just said so, because you thought that's what I wanted to hear. But that's alright. Really. However, you must always remember to be yourself in every situation, even if you love someone. Because if you base your love on a lie like that, it won't end well for you. Well, it probably won't end well anyways. But that's life. Peculiar as always. He has a variety of unique and powerful items to trade, but he only trades them for children. Yes, children. And he won't accept anything else. You might think it's difficult to find a spare child in the remote dungeons, but luckily for you, there's one in a cage on the first floor who is happy to accompany you. And Pocketcat is very happy to take her. If you do trade her, she'll stay there with him. Don't think too much about what might happen to her. If you refuse him here, don't worry. You have another opportunity deeper in the dungeon, in the village of the cave dwellers. But if you refuse him here, well, next time, he won't be so polite. He'll become desperate, even rude. Frankly, it's unbecoming. Why, hello again, stranger. I came to a sudden realization that you happen to have a lovely little human girl with you. And I've been asking for such a thing for a while now. I think you should seriously consider my offer and just hand over the girl. How's it going to be, old chap? No. You see, a large chap myself, asking nicely for such a small offering. Something so insignificant. You barely even know this little creature. You just met her a few fleeting moments ago, yet you declined me this tiny pleasure. My only pleasure. I'll ask once more. Will you give me the girl? Will you politely give me the girl? No. This one says no. Master, what do I do? You don't always get what you want, huh? I did think you loved me. I really did. I mean, how else do you explain all those long gazes we shared? And how we always used to talk to the long hours of the night? Just the two of us. Maybe our feet gently touched each other when no one else was watching. I thought something was there. I think it's best for me to go. I'll leave while I still have my dignity. Goodbye. He almost takes the girl from you by force, but stops. But why? It's clear the girl is the only thing he wants. Why didn't he try to take her from you? Who is this master of his? Is there another mysterious character in the dungeons who desires the girl who may give us some clues? Why, what an astute question. There is indeed. Deep down, at what is almost the lowest layer of the dungeon, we can find the ancient stone doors leading to the city of the gods. In the tombs that are its entrance, in an area drenched in divine mystery, we find the Lady of Moon. She will fully restore your health and limbs, a rare blessing indeed in the dungeons, and all she asks for is the girl. A small price to pay, wouldn't you agree? But why does she want the child? Well, she doesn't. Her master does, the moon god. She serves him because, like the mysterious god, she doesn't believe humans deserve the same power as the old gods. But if the moon really is an old god, he's one of the strongest beings in existence, so why doesn't he just stop us himself? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll discuss that a little later. So, the Pocketcat serves the moon god. Like the Lady of Moon and apparently their shared master, Pocketcat can't just take what he wants. He has to ask nicely for it. He doesn't attack you at all in the dungeons, and hundreds of years later in the scorched city of Preheval, he can't attack you there without your permission. Why is he there, in that place, in that time? In Preheval, in the year 1942, the Second Great War has just ended. 14 people from all over Europa and beyond find themselves on a train to the city, only for it to suddenly stop in the outskirts. All of them shared the same dream. A strange harlequin atop the tower in the heart of the city, welcoming them to a twisted life and death contest, of which there can only be one winner, the Festival of Termina. He isn't the true host of the contest, though. That honour belongs to his silent master, the moon god, Rare. We finally learn the trickster's name then. Let's not flip to a later chapter yet, though. We're still discussing our friend Pocketcat. Upon entering the city proper, you'll find him. All apologies, pleased to meet you. You can call me Pocketcat. I feel like we've met somewhere before. Perhaps in a past life. Things sure have changed since then, haven't they? We live in peculiar times. The world has gone through true darkness. What do you think follows such intense darkness? It has to be growth into something new, right? Yes, change is the only thing inevitable. From personal experience, I'd say a true darkness is followed by chaos. The mind, or the common consciousness we all share, strives for something new. But there lies the danger. You see, chaos can ragdoll us in any one direction. The direction is not always the light. I didn't mean to take your time, so I'll get straight to the point. Not only a wandering gentleman, but I'm also a head salesman of sorts with deep pockets. What is a head salesman, you ask? Well, it is exactly what it sounds. I'm willing to part from my valuable collection if the price is right. And the price is severed heads from those participating in the festival. Macabre, I know, but you get used to it. God knows I did. He's reprising his role as a salesman of sorts. No children this time. He's already got plenty. Instead, he wants the heads of your fellow contestants. Just like how you become the sole survivor of the festival is your own business, how you get the other contestants' heads is up to you. Another example of the followers of Rare having a light touch, never hurting anyone directly or even telling you how to outright. But what's this about chaos? He's saying in so many words that after the darkness of the world wars pass, humanity will be reinvigorated and have the energy to go in any direction they like. But that the darkness removed the guardrails, so to speak, and that energy might just take them in a direction they don't like. As you have no doubt watched my video about the machine god and Lagarde, you'll know this is a common theme in the series. The best laid plans of gods and men cannot fight against this chaos, and in fact this chaos is a useful tool if one wants to break the cycles that bind us. Pocketcat, once again, shows himself to be quite observant and insightful. Perhaps the ability to read minds helps. On the third and final night of the festival, any contestant who has survived that long loses their minds and falls to the influence of the leering lunar god, becoming moon-scorched. Well, all except one. As you enter the museum, you'll cross paths with your old friend. "Oh, hello there. Fancy seeing you here. Oh my, how the party at the museum is getting wild. Feels like everyone's enjoying the ball while they still can. This wheelchair just took Miss Olivia to the party. She was feeling a bit left out. As much as I'd love to stay here and chat, I have a job to do. I still need to invite some other people, so I'll see you later, old chap. Bye." You'll soon realise what happened to Miss Olivia. The machine monster mechanical dance roams the dreamlike halls of the museum. It vents out poison and screams at you not to stare at it. Defeat it. Claim its soul. And it's the same soul as the wheelchair-bound, low self-esteem contestant, Olivia. The Pocketcat dragged her to the museum to put her on display at the height of the festival, knowing full well it would break her. That's a little odd, isn't it? Isn't he a pacifist? Does that break his rules? Well, we can't know what conversation the pair had before he brought her there, but I have a suspicion she agreed to it. There's a particular hook he could have stuck into her. Olivia has travelled to the city to find her sister, Ryla. Ryla is in the bunker beneath the museum, and Pocketcat could have convinced her to give him permission to take her there to find her sister. Or it could simply be that because Pocketcat isn't technically causing any damage himself, he's allowed to do it. They both seem viable to me, but this is one of those minor lore notes that we'll simply never have an answer for. Well, who needs a reason? Escorting a pretty girl to a party is its own reward, surely. The Pocketcat himself can be found in a quiet corner, standing under a painting. It's a very specific painting, so specific that it's been modified. It's based on Picasso's Guernica. Sorry to keep being a tease, but yes, we'll have to discuss this later too. Speaking to our feline friend here, he's been thinking some more. Art falls into two categories. No, not the art, my bad. Artists fall into two categories. There are the ones who see something taking place in the world. Maybe it's the wrongdoings of their fellow pedestrians. Maybe it's abuse of power by those sitting on top of the pyramid scheme. Whatever it is, it feeds their inspiration and creativity, and they desperately want to put their own spin on it. I call these people extroverted artists. Then there are the other half of the poor sods. Those ones who dwell in their own thoughts and insight. They want to paint a picture of their inner world, maybe in hopes that someone else would understand them a little better, or maybe to connect with a few like-minded individuals. I call these people introverted artists. Both sound selfish in their own right. They're extroverted artists who benefits from the suffering of others, while introverted artists, on the other hand, sound quite self-centered, only wanting to talk about themselves. There might be a third kind as well. My favourite kind, actually. Authors who don't even have a clear picture in mind when they start their creative process. Such chaotic process can lead to unexplored directions. Say, old sport, the one who dreams all this, the dreamer buried deep underground. What type do you think she is? You probably don't know this yet, but he's speaking, of course, of the machine god buried deep under your feet. Poor Ryla, the sister of not quite as poor Olivia, entombed in her metal chrysalis. What kind of dreamer is she? Well, it's obvious. The third type. Ah, I let my bias shine through and you followed on it. Still, I think you might be right there, my friend. For a minute, consider the idea that anyone who can shape the world to their will is an artist. Then this question of inspiration and intention is relevant to anyone of any power. In Fear and Hunger, we have quite a few persons like that. The gods, the humans who become gods, even the humble mortals who take part in their games. But Pocketcat isn't just talking about the world around him. He's talking to you. Are you an artist? Do you have the ability to shape your world? Of course you do. Do you benefit from the suffering of others? Or just think about yourself? Well, Pocketcat may break the fourth wall, but that doesn't prevent him from being a pessimist. Is your desire to align yourself with what others want? Or is your desire to align others with what you want? So, that's the what of Pocketcat. Well, how about the why? Our feline friend isn't so easy to peel apart. First, let me tell you a story. It's a very engaging story. It'll jump right off the page at you. It was a rainy day in the countryside just north from the forest of Merwood. Willem, the wildest child known in town, would stare at the raindrops behind the window screen. His mother would warn him of going outside. During rain, decent boys would help their parents with various indoor tasks. Rain brings forth all kinds of dangers not otherwise known to little boys. Disregarding the warnings and, without a worry in the world, Willem dashed through the bushes and ran deep into the Merwood forest. In the heart of the forest, all wet from the rain, Willem heard slight panting noises from an overgrown grotto nearby. Cautiously, Willem peeked through the leaves. He could not believe his eyes when he saw a finely dressed cat standing on 2 feet, twice as tall as Willem's father would be. The cat's back was facing Willem. Its hand was moving swiftly inside its pocket, while 2 big yellow eyes gleamed inside a burlap bag in great excitement. Suddenly, the hand movement came to a halt. Even if Willem was well hidden behind the leaves, slowly the cat turned its eyes towards him. In terror, Willem ran as fast as he could towards his home. The 2 glowing yellow eyes of the cat haunted him all the way back to his home gates. His mother was there to meet him by the front door. "So you had to go to the woods, did you?" said his mother. "You saw something you shouldn't have, right?" questioned his mother. "And how do I know this?" Willem's mother would go inside to get a little parcel with decorated wrappings. "This appeared on the front door just before you came. It was directed to young Mr. Willem." Slowly, Willem unwrapped the decorated paper with small mouse prints on it. Inside the parcel, there was catnip. The town of Merwood was in festive mood. It was the beginning of the harvest season and food was plentiful. Willem had to wear his Sunday suit, the suit he would typically wear when going to church on Sundays. Needless to say, the suit wasn't to Willem's liking. Now, you know we had to make good impressions to the city folk," his mother would say. "Why should I care?" said Willem. Willem's mother would pull him by the ear violently and say, "Don't you understand our livelihood depends on those noble and the fancy?" Willem shrugged it off and nodded. It is important to obey your parents after all, if you are to grow up even somewhat decent and moral. It is even written on the Book of our Lord, the Bible of Allmere. The party guests started coming as the sun set. The festive people were of all kinds. There were also many people Willem had never seen before, especially one gay gentleman with a constant grin on his face caught Willem's attention. The man also noticed young Willem. He winked his eye, even though otherwise his face was set in the same grin all the time. The gentleman gave Willem jeepers creepers. As the full moon had risen the highest, and the festive people were at their most cocked, Willem noticed the gay gentleman gone. After a short search, he found the man from their backyard, howling at the moon. This already made young Willem very nervous, but then the man turned his gaze towards Willem. His eyes were the same as the 2 haunting yellow eyes that Willem had seen in the Merwood forest some days ago. Suddenly, Willem realized the size of the man. For some reason, he had not realized it before, but the man was almost the same height as their house. With a cat-like expression, the man would say, "Fancy meeting you here, young mister." The illustration on the book looks very lifelike. The Pocketcat seems to stare straight at you from the book pages. The Pocketcat would say, "So how do you think we should handle the situation, now that you've seen something you shouldn't have?" Well, let us not dwell on those matters. The night is festive. It is a full moon after all. While the cat-like man stares at the moon, he also murmurs something. "Oh, the old one, my lullabies go to deaf ears." The humankind pursues the same goals persistently. The cat asks you one last question. If I were to get the moon itself to you, would you give up on your quest and lay with me here tonight? Well, that was interesting. Pocketcat's story came to life to break the fourth wall. Well, break the page and talk to you directly, just like he speaks to you, the player, when you speak to him in game. He's the only character that does this, but he's not the only character who has stories written about them. There's 4 of interest. Pocketcat, naturally, the Crow Mauler, Skin Granny, and Ron Teals. All 4 of these are explicitly said to have stories written about them, or we actually get to read the stories. But they're all quite different, right? What's the connection between them? To briefly recap Pocketcat, he is a servant of the old god Rare. He shows great knowledge about things he shouldn't, and is the subject of a fairy tale, the books of which can apparently come to life, perhaps in a kind of summoning of him. To jump ahead just a little, the Pocketcat passes his role onto another performer at a certain point. The reasons why, well, you'll just have to wait, but keep in mind that he can possess people, in a manner of speaking. The Crow Mauler is similar. Those afflicted by the god of the depths can be possessed by the spirit of the Crow Mauler. It, too, has an old poem, or perhaps a folk song, written about it. Crow, crow, grow your horn, vile as the snow in the Scarsburg Massacre Row. Crow, crow, oh why do you maul? The meat is fresh and the blood still falls. Crow, crow, are you there? He is coming, with nothing to bear. Crow, crow, behind you now. Oh crow, please reap, oh crow, what I sow. In the dungeons, we read of the slow decline of the captain who goes mad and eventually becomes this creature, the Crow Mauler. The process is not dissimilar to what happens with Pocketcat, and we're not talking about that just yet. The Skin Granny is a little different. One can find it in the nightmare memories of Ragnvalder, the outlander who entered the dungeon to enact revenge upon Lagarde for slaughtering his family. He hails from the northern country of Oldegard. There they have a story about the Skin Granny, a creature who, if you abandon your family, appears when the black seeps into the cracks of your cabin to nibble at your loved ones. It's said to have a strong presence in nightmares, as we can see. But it's more than just a nightmare. Its claws cut deep, and it will rip your face off if you let it. The Ronteals, we see them in Termina. When one draws a sigil of the moon god and travels to, well, we refer to it as Rare's realm, but it's not really his. It's more likely a kind of mental realm, one shaped by the minds of people in reality. Rare sees into our minds, and so his sigil allows one to access this realm, but not usually. He doesn't normally do this. Marina proclaims as such when you enter this realm with her. Perhaps the proximity to the festival and the actual god himself allows it to drill deeper. Whatever it is, the main inhabitant of these areas are the Ronteals. The new gods in Mahab describe them as such. A being that lurks in the shadows. Different tales about Ronteals have been passed on for many generations. It is said that Ronteal appears first in the nightmares, only to fuel his or her own materialization to the physical world with the fear it instills. The Ronteal are the key that explains the other entities on this list, or, as I've taken to calling them, the living stories. Each of them, the Ronteal, Crow Mauler, Skin Granny, and yes, the Pocketcat, are stories that have come to life, ideas that can act on the physical plane, but how? How is such a thing possible? Now, all of you are of course familiar with the concept of the green hue, and even me saying this will no doubt instantly help you understand where this theory is going. But for clarity's sake, I shall explain. The green hue is where the old gods originate from. The old gods are concepts. For example, Grogoroth is the concept of destruction. Sylvian is the concept of creation, etc. If you're familiar with the concept of platonic shapes or perfect ideas, then it's very similar. The green hue is where these perfect ideas of creation, destruction and such exist, and they emanate outwards like light from the sun. Human reality can be understood as a distance away from this green hue, but other layers of reality are closer. Mahab, the city of the gods, is a step closer to the green hue, and the void is closer again. While the exact order of layers isn't entirely clear, I believe that the so-called Rare's realm and dreams are layers above human reality and thus closer to the green hue. Now, understanding that, what are the living stories? If we have these reality-shaping, massive ideas that are Groguroth and Sylvian and the rest, why couldn't we have smaller ideas? The living stories are often subservient to larger ideas. The Pocketcat is a servant of Rare, and the Chrome Mauler is tied somehow to the god of the depths, but not always, since the Skin Granny and Ron Teal don't seem to be associated with specific gods. But these smaller ideas are clearly shaped by what humans think of them. If the ideas originate from the green hue, why do they look like humans or require human fear to manifest? The traces of Groguroth tell us why. The older gods are too pure for this world. They are the true forms of the feelings and ideas that linger in men. But humans, they are too tainted by their own mind and ambition to understand purity. Think of the perfect shape of fear and destruction. Now take a look at the world you delve. Do you see that shape? The shape could never exist among men, because the shape varies between every human. If you could truly see the shape everyone shares, it would shatter the individual mind and existence. The ideas are pure when they're in the green hue. When our minds try to understand them, they're reshaped into something else, something diluted. Our minds could never possibly grasp the pure form of a god, as Groguroth demonstrates by instantly popping our brains with a mere glimpse. The stories that are spread about Pocketcat and the others are a method to reshape the entities and grant them purchase here, to bring them lower from the green hue and grant them a physical form. There's a few different methods for this. Pocketcat and the Chrome Mauler possess a human form, but the Rontiels spread fear. The Skin Granny doesn't seem to appear directly in reality, or at least we haven't seen it do so, but it proves that entities that are mere stories can still hurt real people. Well, living stories, that's a neat little theory, isn't it? If this energy of the green hue can be siphoned and moulded so easily, surely we'd see it being used elsewhere then. Indeed we would. And what an astute question, dear viewer. Let's briefly examine the different kinds of ideas that shape the world of fear and hunger. We've discussed the old gods previously, but what of their traces? When an old god leaves or dies, their traces are left behind. Groguroth imprinted destruction on our reality, and our minds can't comprehend how it would function without it. So we force the idea of him as the trace. It still does have some connection to the actual idea held in the green hue, a slim tendril reaching to the source of all things, but it isn't the thing itself. If humanity decided that, say, we didn't need destruction, or nature, or creation, or whatever other traces are left, then they would vanish overnight. But we do, so they don't. The collective unconscious of humanity has an idea of what those forces are, so the forces stay. Sometimes, even singular people can manifest these entities themselves. When fighting Nashra in the dungeon, he does something curious. He summons an entity called Darkness that looks very much like Groguroth, but when he faces the full traces of Groguroth, he is instantly destroyed. That's because this darkness he summons is born from his own will. Nashra knows he can defeat the god of destruction and replace him, so naturally, he can control an entity that appears like him. Nashra told himself this story, and because he has exceptional willpower and is a new god, it actually manifested. His cultists believing in him probably helped a bit too. It's not the first time this has happened. The ancestors of Enki seem to do something similar, summoning a kind of Grogorothian demon by repeating the story over and over. Kill a child, spill their blood, and the blood god will reward you with knowledge. For generations it didn't work, until it did. That's ideas reaching down to humanity from the green hue, but what of ideas pushing up from us? We have two prime examples of this, the new gods and the ascended gods. The new gods are humans, and some lizard men, but we're not going to discuss them, who, by means of a special throne granted to us by the old gods, become super powerful beings who shape humanity over their tenure, usually lasting a few centuries. Once they're deposed from their throne, they stay in the hall of the new gods to just wait and watch. We can go through this process firsthand, and it appears that our souls get baked in the green hue in the void and come back different. There are choices you can make when you become a new god. Depending on your choices, you become stronger or weaker, but What determines this is how many people believe in you. The worst ending choices lead you to become a lesser-known new god with a small cult, and you're quickly replaced. The best endings have your worshippers worldwide, with you as the only god. We see this in the gods met in-game too. The Fellowship fall when their believers stop worshipping them. Nashra is still kicking over 1,000 years after his defeat because of his cults of yellow mages. Even Ron Chambara keeps popping up because of his poetry. The new gods hijack the process that living stories use to interact with the world, pushing against the current and elevating themselves to the level of myth and legend. The stronger the legend, the belief, the stronger the new god. Or is it the opposite? The stronger a new god is, the more people believe in them. Is there a difference? You all know how ascended gods work by now, don't you? When the child of a new god and a special human meets the soul of a dead old god, they can ascend into a new being. Ulmir was the first known ascended god, and we see this process taking place in the dungeons, when the god of fear and hunger was born. Ulmir, when he died on the cross, became more than a man. He became a symbol of hope and domination. When the god of fear and hunger ascended, she became a symbol of the emotions of her name, and transformed how humanity reacted to them. No longer forces of oppression, fear and hunger instead drove humanity forwards. We began to enjoy the pain from these feelings and use it as fuel for progress. Ulmir likely did the same with the feelings of hope and domination, but we have little knowledge of the world before his ascension. The new gods lead humanity. The ascended gods reshape their minds, and the old gods shape reality. Would you say that they're introverted or extroverted artists? What does Pocketcat shape? It was a rainy day in the countryside just north from the forest of Merwood. Willem, the most mischievous child known in town, stared at the raindrops behind his window screen, just longing for an adventure. During downpour, decent boys should help their parents with various household chores instead. Being the pompous boy he was, Willem refused to give a helping hand. The consequences of such refusals were all too familiar to Willem. He'd get sentenced to bed without a dinner, and so he did. Crying under his blanket, fits of Willem's anger brought forth his reflection from a mirror on the wall. The boy from the mirror introduced himself as Melu, the sleeping twin brother of Willem that came to this world far too early, and thus he could only view the world from the land of opposites. Melu wanted to warn his brother of the coming calamity, but his words echoed from the land of opposites, so they came out all wrong. A large beetle man climbed in from the window. The beetle man was tall, taller than Willem's father, and rounder than his father as well. The face of the beetle man was obscured. He wore a similar mask Willem's grandfather had worn in the war to avoid gas melting his eyes and burning his lungs. Turkillo, the beetle man, had an urgent mission for Willem. You see, the ancient kingdom Turkillo came from was under a serious threat, and Willem was the only boy who could help. Willem was a bit hesitant, but Turkillo was already forcing the boy out from his bedroom window out into the rain. "We got no time for thinking," said Turkillo. The beetle man showed the way with his lantern. Only Willem had trouble keeping up with the pace as Turkillo flew fast deep inside the Merwood with his man-beetle wings. Turkillo's lantern got more distant until Willem couldn't see it no more. Hopeless and now lost in the woods, he started crying, not unlike how small song thrush chicks cry and beg their mother for food. And just like that, a giant song thrush grabbed Willem and took him to a treetop nest full of chicks fighting for their place in the world. Those chicks knew that to succeed in life, you had to push the competition over nest boundaries. Willem tried, but ultimately fell off the nest. Just as he was about to meet his maker, Turkillo scooped by him and grabbed Willem with his cold man-beetle hands. Turkillo scolded Willem from wandering off. Willem slid down a muddy hill and found himself on a large opening in the forest. In the middle of that opening, two giant baby-faced blindworms were caught in a wrestling match. They bit each other, clawed each other, all while crying and wallowing loudly. Turkillo yelled from above that this is the true nature of men. This would be Willem's future once he grew up to be an adult. While the two talked, the other, more ugly-faced blindworm had bested the other. Hungry for more devastation, the thing set its eyes on Willem. It gave Willem a desperate chase. Willem ran to a nearby thicket in hopes that the blindworm couldn't fit in there. Instead, the beast thrusted itself past broken branches with ferocious force. Fat from eating his other baby-faced blindworm sibling, One particularly sharp branch punctured the belly of the beast, and from within hundreds of small blindworm babies spilled all over the place. The little worms started wrestling and devouring each other the moment they landed on the ground. Willem realised that this is how the giant baby-faced blindworms got so big to begin with. They kept eating each other until only one remained. For now, it seemed like Willem was safe. For some reason, he did not feel comfortable, though. It felt like someone or something was keenly watching his every move. Then he noticed them, a pair of glowing eyes staring right at him from the darkness of shrubs and leaves. Willem did not like how the stare felt, panicked and ran in the opposite direction. Little did Willem know at the time, but what followed his every move from behind the bush was the tall cat, the Pocketcat himself. The rest of the text is unintelligible and smudged over. It looked like someone didn't want you to read any further, for whatever reason. That was a good story, wasn't it? It's a retelling of the first story, and it has some different details. The first version we found in the dungeons. The second we find in Preheval, the site of the festival. Ah, the festival, a jubilee of cosmic proportions. Is it real, or is it just something from a fairy tale? Well, why not both? Preheval is the site of the last festival, and while you would expect that a participant should come away learning a great deal about it, unfortunately, much is still a mystery. For instance, how long has it been going on? When did the sulfur cult take over? How is it relevant to the birth of the machine god? And, perhaps most importantly, why does Rare do it? Oh, we can answer that one. First things first, who is Rare? Let's look at the definitive source of information for the moon god, his skin Bible, courtesy of Enki. Very much like the sun, the moon is one of the primordial entities, and thus it has lore and beliefs written since the dawn of time. This makes it difficult to separate facts from fiction, and mad ramblings from hidden truths. Consistent details among the myriad of stories seem to hint at a god called Rare, also known as the trickster god and the moon god. In the most ancient writings, Rare is depicted as the god of the insane and those who've succumbed to madness. His blessing to men is his moonlight, which is said to uncover the truth underneath the human filth, a truth that is often too much for a human mind to handle. It can be debated whether his version of the truth is more accurate than that of the human filth. Unlike many of the other older gods, Rare's part in the greater scheme of things remains a mystery. Just looking at the night sky, you can see his presence in an eternal slumber. This makes his secrecy even more infuriating. He is literally hiding in plain sight. What do the new gods say about him? Trickster god, also known as the moon god. He is one of the last older gods to still observe mankind. He is a jealous kind. He would not share the godhood and the world order with humans and the new gods. He has many ploys to diminish our influence. A god of truth and or madness who doesn't like humans trying to become gods. Right, now we know everything about Rare, so how about his festival? Every so often, the moon god drifts close to the surface of the planet and observes it directly. Anyone burned by the green light reflected off his surface quickly goes mad, and eventually turns into a monster called a moon-scorched. The book Truth Under the Moonlight gives a hint at what's happening here. Who of us doesn't cover their true face and hide behind a persona? In the broad daylight, we adopt a social role depending on the surrounding people. We put on a mask that works as the public image of our true personality. Do we hide our face to avoid the judgment of people? Or do we look down in shame as the sun watches our every move? A sun that knows our deepest longings and lustful thoughts. Only in the darkness of night does the true and vile nature of men get revealed. We share our decrepit bodies only to the select few under the moonlight. Despite what lowly thieves cowering in the shadows would like you to think, the moonlight hides no one. Rare sees into your mind and your deepest desires. The truth of your soul is revealed under his moonlight. It's no coincidence then that his sigil bores into what seems to be a plane shaped by the human unconscious, and the abilities he grants gives one what we call psychic powers. Worship the moon god, and one can learn to read minds, sense the locations of other people, and have great mental fortitude. He is said to be a god of madness, but really, it's that humans can't handle the truth he shows you. Perhaps that's not so different than being unable to withstand the form of pure destruction Groguroth shows us. The festival only lasts 3 days naturally, but for some reason, this one has lasted a month. Well, some reason. Somehow, somewhere, and somewhen, the cult of the mysterious sulphur god took over the festival for their own ends. Throughout the festival, the contestants are haunted by dreams of communing with the Harlequin percolate atop the tower, under the watchful gaze of the moon god. But once they climb the tower, it's revealed that Rare isn't in charge at all. In fact, he's long since left, and all that is there are his traces. The cult of the sulphurous god have instead taken the festival over for their own ends. Ends which have been discussed to death, and I will give them no more words here. You understand. But why? Why does Rare do this? We don't know when the festival started, how often it happens, where it happens, or much else really. We don't have any other clues. I'm just kidding, of course we have more clues. Did you think I was reading the Tales of the Pocketcat books for fun? Well, yes, I was, but also, they depict a festival. Really, it's obvious when you notice. Take a look at the first book. The boy, Willem, finds the Pocketcat in the woods and is now a target of his. Later, the town of Merwood was having a big party where everyone was expected to dress their best, and we find a gentleman who's Pocketcat in disguise. The moon is full, and the Pocketcat slinks away to howl at it. Willem finds him, and he threatens the child with unspeakable crimes. He whispers to the moon, "Oh, old one, my lullabies go to deaf ears." The humankind pursues the same goals persistently, and then he asks you if you will give up on your quest. He's talking to Willem, but he's really talking to you. But he's really talking to you. So what is he saying? It's a festive night. A festival proper, perhaps. One from before the sulphur cult were involved, and, like the party in the museum, everyone's dressed up in their fancy clothes. Then, Pocketcat finds his victim, Willem. A victim he had already met by chance. One he already had his eyes on. Almost like he knew about Willem ahead of time. He asks if you would give up your quest, if you would have the moon brought to you. What is your quest? The grand scheme in motion in the dungeons is the birth of the god of fear and hunger, and it's well established that Rare does not want to share godhood with us. Pocketcat is asking you, on behalf of his master, to give up this quest, and if so, he will take you to the moon. That sounds like an odd gift until you recall what happens at the end of the festival in Preheval. The two options are, you facilitate the birth of the machine god, or you meet Rare atop the tower. Was Pocketcat offering the same deal to you? Was Rare leering overhead outside the dungeon? Or perhaps he was talking about the girl. We don't know where he takes her after he leaves. Whatever it is he does to her to ensure she doesn't become a god, well, it's probably best not to think about. In Preheval, we find another version of the tale of the Pocketcat and poor Willem. It's apparently faithful to the original version of the story, and as a result, it seems to expand the story of the first chapter of the first book, where Willem was lost in the woods. It's more detail heavy, so forgive me for recapping more. After refusing to help with chores on a rainy day, Willem's angry tears summon a mirror image of himself, Melu, who warns him of a coming disaster. The disaster arrives before they can hash this out, and in the form of a giant beetle man, Turkillo. Remember that name, by the way. Turkillo came from an ancient kingdom that was under threat and needed Willem to help. Willem got lost in the woods and started crying, and his cries sounded like a song thrush's cries. Wouldn't you know it, a giant song thrush picked him up and dropped him in its nest with its chicks. Fighting for their place in the world, they jostled and pushed each other over the edge. Thankfully, Turkillo grabs him mid-air. In the second chapter, Willem stumbles upon the two baby-faced blind worms, which, despite their names, aren't worms but lizards. Maybe you can think of them as snake-like. The uglier blind worm won the fight, but stabbed itself on a stick while chasing Willem, and hundreds of baby-faced blind worms poured out, immediately devouring each other. After this, Willem stumbles upon the Pocketcat, and the book ends. It's hardly a tale of the Pocketcat this time, and no fourth wall breaking. So, how is it a festival? There's no talk of the moon in this one, but there needn't be. because it's obvious it's just an extended version of the first chapter of the previous version. The next chapter was about the festival in the town of Merswood, but this version that we read didn't get that far and was in fact censored, so we couldn't. But it still does have some elements of a festival, filtered through a fairy tale lens. Willem is accosted by a doppelganger from the mirror before being taken. The thrush chicks are people fighting to be the sole survivor. The struggle of the twin blindworms, the twin reptiles, mirrors the struggle during Allmir's ascension with Sulphur. Allmir won, but was later killed and the new gods took over, like the baby worms pouring out of the blindworm's corpse. Is there much difference between being stabbed with a branch or a spear? If almost every detail in the story is lining up with the festival of Termina, what is going on with Turkalo? He's a beetle man from an ancient kingdom, and one who doesn't think highly of humans. One of the sigils of the lost old gods on the clock appears to be a beetle. Now, I am not one to base my theories on data mined content, so I will tread very carefully here. When examining the game files, the clock sigil of this beetle is named Turkle. So, it's likely that the beetle man in the story is this lost old god. What his domain is, and what happened to him, is a mystery, and I shan't speculate any further about Turkle. However, Turkle's kingdom is obviously Mahab, the city of the gods. How could a mere child save Mahab? I think you know the answer to that. We know of two ways: becoming a new god, or becoming an ascended god. Well, doesn't that answer why Pocketcat was so interested in Willem then? If Willem was earmarked to become a god of some kind, it's natural then that Pocketcat would be deployed to stop him. And in a festival no less. Now where else have we seen these things before? Pocketcat was in the dungeon to stop the girl, and he was in Preheval to promote participation in the festival, and ideally, ignore the machine god. The festival was called down on Preheval right as the machine god was to be born. These aren't coincidences, and the fairy tale books tell us this. If the second book is more detailed, then it stands to reason the chapters detailing the festival itself were removed to keep the participants in Preheval in the dark. The festival and Pocketcat are tools of Rare to stop humans from ascending to godhood. The cat for a light touch, and the festival to burn down a whole region if need be. How many potential godlings have been taken by Pocketcat over the millennia? How many regions scorched into madness by the moon? A lot, one would guess, if these stories are so common as to survive in book form. I'm sorry, I've neglected to explain what moon scorching actually is this entire time. Simply put, when one is exposed to the gaze of the moon god for long enough, around 3 days, one transforms into a monster. Rare can see through our carefully prepared exteriors and through to the truth, and forcibly reveals that. Or so it seems. Truth be told, the moonscorched forms seem to align with how a person sees themselves, rather than what they actually are. Take for example, Abella. She is not particularly feminine by the standards of the era, being a tall, strong mechanic, and she's well aware of that. Underneath her masculine exterior, well, she's still somewhat masculine, but her love of romance belies a femininity not obvious to a casual observer. This dichotomy would play upon her mind, making her worry that she's more masculine than she ought to be. Her moonscorched form is Chaugna, the monstrous elephant who appears to be a man with a phallic parasite on its face. That doesn't sound like what Abella is truly like, but it does sound like what Abella thinks of herself. But, remember our previous topics. The truth is revealed under the moonlight, yes, but what is that truth? The truth is what is real. It's reality, of course. But the gods rewrite reality however they please. And, in fact, humans can too. How do they do that? Through their beliefs, as in, a strong enough belief is reality. Like the moon can reflect the sun and light up the dark night, Rare's gaze reflects the green hue and lights up our beliefs about ourselves, bringing them to the surface in an explosive fashion. The contestants all get special moonscorched forms because time is running out. The festival was only supposed to last 3 days, but has been artificially extended by the sulfur cultists, if anything about this could be called artificial or natural. Thus, the exposure of the green gaze of Rare is much higher, forcing wilder forms out of them. Oh, and what beautiful forms. Let's take a look. Levi, the drug-addicted ex-child soldier, becomes the weeping scope. He sees himself as a crying loser war machine, and oh, would you look at that? Marina, the occultist with daddy issues, becomes the cocoon. Now, she carries daddy on her back, and she'll never be free from his control, just like she's always worried. Samarie, the living human sacrifice to the old gods. She never got a fair shake really, but maybe her unrequited love of Marina will solve all her problems. She becomes Dysmorphia, a reflection of her broken and doomed body. She mimics the dead Olmir, a god who died trying to reach the heavens. Tanaka, the unlucky businessman, becomes Judgment. He's judging himself mostly. His flesh is full of the shards of the glass ceiling he's broken, and he's very obsessed with working hard. Henrik becomes the new mayor, the gentleman. And honestly, he isn't that different from before. He's still quite the gourmand. Caligura is definitely not different than before, becoming Monster. He's still just as charming, but you know what? He probably smells better now. Osar, seeing himself as the puppet of Nashra, embodies that with his head overcome by some kind of parasite. His voice is muffled from behind it. He's called Mastermind now, but who does that name really refer to? Olivia, poor sweet Olivia, taken to the museum to partake in the ball and is overwhelmed, becoming mechanical dance. She always saw herself as a half-mechanical monster and hated being looked at for it. Karen, the war-hungry journalist. She said she was more a Valkyrie than a vulture, but the line is a bit blurred. Either way, she carries off the noble soldiers from the battlefield. Marco always saw himself as only good for fighting, and he was good at it. Now, as the giant, he carries around his sister, perhaps to protect her, or perhaps as a punishment. But punishment for who? As you can see, these forms all seem to be how the person sees themselves rather than what might be called the truth of the matter. Sadly, Pav and August never quite make it to the end of the festival, so we haven't seen their Moonscorch forms. Ah, I missed one. Perhaps the most delightful of all. Dan's Moonscorch. Oh, no. I almost got you. You can wait a moment. Of course, while one is generally safer from moonscorching while indoors, that doesn't mean other terrible things can't befall oneself. The museum is full of partygoers whose minds have been scoured clean, and it's here we again find our friend Pocketcat. Now, to finally return to the painting Pocketcat stands under in the Museum of Pre-Heval, Guernica by Pablo Picasso. The real painting was about the World War II German army bombing the titular city of Guernica, showing the chaos and terror of humans and animals as the city was destroyed. Quite curiously, our version here seems to replace some of the characters with the old gods. The bull becomes Grogoroth, standing behind the dead child in his usual bloodthirsty fashion. The woman in the window is now Sylvian, the goddess of love, appearing similar to how she did in the key art for the first game. The frantic horse is removed, replaced with a monstrous face eating a person. The secretive god of the depths. Whoever painted this was well researched, as the god of the depths wasn't well known even before it was killed in the dungeons of fear and hunger hundreds of years earlier. For those keeping count, that's two old gods unmentioned in the painting. Venushka, the dead god of nature, and Rare, the trickster moon god. Can we find them? There's a possibility that Venushka, being the child of Sylvian and Grogoroth, is represented by the dead child, who does have Grogoroth standing behind it. But we don't care about that god today. We're here for the moon, gazing serenely overhead. Watching the carnage unfold beneath is an eye. Rare, the moon god, is watching the old gods trample humanity under their feet. In fear and hunger, the German equivalent nation of Bremen was taken over by the populist Kaiser, who, of course, we all know is secretly Lagarde, the mercenary captain the four heroes tried to rescue, or kill, in the dungeon. This new painting, then, is likening the Bremen army under the Kaiser to the cruelty of the old god's ancient order, where humanity was said to have suffered greatly. Ulmir's goal was to re-establish that order upon his ascension, and he supposedly did. But he died not long after, and the new gods took over once again. This painter sees the Kaiser as the Kaiser would like to see himself. The return of Ulmir unifying humanity under the old order. That's enough about Lagarde for now. Why is this depiction of Rare as an eye so important? Can we find any other mention of, say, Rare as an eye, or watching or seeing in some way? Almost every god is associated with eyes in some form, Grogroth being covered in them during his fight, Sylvian's sigil, Venushka having a third eye, Ulmir and Sulfur missing one. But Rare is a little different. Yes, one of the symbols in his book has an eye, and his strange face does emphasize his eyes, and yes, he is surrounded by wheels of eyes like an Ophanim angel, but there is a little more to it. Let us return to the Lady of Moon and examine her dialogue. Who are you? I'm Lady of Moon, a mere servant of the Moon God. Moon God? Yes, I'm sure you've seen him. Just one glance at the night sky. He is ever looking at you. He is very suspicious of you, of men. What is your origin? I come from the green, where you see the world through a green looking glass, where the older beings originate. Lots of vision words here. Seeing the world through a green looking glass. The Moon God is ever looking. It suggests that Rare is gazing at us through the green hue, and thus that this green light is his vision. If he's looking at you, it's melting your mind, and you're going to Moonscorch. In the dungeon, one can find a trinket in a chest in Mahab called the Ever-Watching Talisman. The description reads, "An ever-watching eye is taking care of you. It seems to relieve your feelings of fear and terror. Rare, the jealous god whose gaze scours the mind of anyone caught in it, can also do the opposite and relieve feelings of fear and terror." The other two talismans, the Purifying Talisman and the Eclipse Talisman, are both explicitly from the East, suggesting that this Ever-Watching Talisman is too, and the Ever-Watching Talisman and Eclipse Talisman even look similar. Do the Easterners have a different understanding of the Moon God? An understanding that is more in line with his desires, one that pacifies his anger at humans? That's best left for another time, for if one scratches at the surface of the Easterners, we will uncover some very deep rabbit holes indeed. Does Rare hate humanity? No, it doesn't seem so. In fact, it seems like he takes care of us if we stay in our place. He even has rules to prevent himself and his minions from interfering, although we don't know if those are self-imposed. But if Rare is ever watching, and his gaze transformed those underneath it, why aren't there more festivals? Perhaps, just perhaps, he doesn't always turn his gaze to the earth below. Perhaps, just perhaps, he isn't just a warden, but a guard. The old gods came from outer space, as is well known. Is there more out there? Is the moon keeping us safe from further reality-shaking changes from meddling outer gods, as much as he is keeping us safe from ascended gods? What a delightful idea that is. Dan. Dan. He has a funny relationship with today's subject, doesn't he? Dan doesn't moonscorch like the rest of the contestants if he loses his mind during the festival. When he succumbs, he is instead possessed by the Pocketcat. This feline has been tormenting him from the shadows for years, you see. It was only a matter of time. Even in Dan's ending B, which is supposed to be the good ending where one survives the festival, he gives in to the cat. The only escape is death. We well understand by now the mechanism of living stories, but why did Pocketcat pick Dan? Out of every person alive, he tormented this specific one for years until he broke. In fact, by sheer coincidence, their paths happened to meet at a crucial juncture, almost as if it was planned well ahead of time. Dan's backstory is tragic. Perhaps the most out of all the contestants, and that's quite the high bar. Briefly explained, his parents were Sylvian bunny mask cultists who travelled with him around Europa. The bunny masks performed sexual rituals to honour the god of life, Sylvian. His parents tried to pass on the teachings of Sylvian to him when he was a child. Doubtless you understand the implications of this and why Pocketcat might be attracted to him. Of course, his life didn't get any better after this. He fell in love, was sent off to war, and returned to find his wife murdered by his father-in-law. So, he travelled to Prehevel to find out why. You know the story. But again, why Dan? As sad as it is, it's not like that kind of abuse is so uncommon that Pocketcat could only find one person like him. The answer is simple. The season of sulphur is upon us. Pocketcat likes children. That much is obvious. The moon god Rare had a need for children to be taken care of, to prevent their ascension to godhood. Thus, their interests aligned. Pocketcat would not need his arm twisted to do his job, you understand. If Pocketcat is choosing a new host, one that doesn't seem to share his specific proclivities, that can only mean one thing. The job that Rare wants done is changing. There are many hints that the grand goal of the Sulphur Cult and the festival is to resurrect their dead god, Sulphur. A god as powerful as him would no doubt have the power to rewrite reality, and potential new ascended gods afterwards would not be a problem anymore. Would a resurrected Sulphur be friends with Rare? Well, I suppose that doesn't matter either, as Rare has left and only his traces remain. In fact, those traces seem to be under the control of the Sulphur Cult, who may be puppeteering his servants. How long have they been doing that for? Were the cult also trying to stop the creation of the god of fear and hunger? While I think this is likely and has been happening for some time, I would be remiss to not tell you that proof of this chain of command is tenuous. We don't exactly know the meaning of the binding change that snapped when Percolatus failed, and we don't know when the Sulphur Cult took over. But we do know one thing. Pocketcat believes the season of sulphur is upon us, that the sulphurous one is due to rise again. When you meet him in the museum, he offers his opinion on your clothing. Osar is dressed in yellow, sulphur yellow, and Pocketcat says this: "The yellow really is the colour of the coming season. You are a trendsetter, not one to follow." Accepting that the grand plan is to usher in an age of sulphur, again the question must be asked, why Dan? An age of sulphur would entail an age of bloodshed, of dismemberment and cruelty. Dan, being a doctor, is perfect for that. He's removed his own organs, even his eye, in an unintentional mimicry of the sulphur god. He even has experience with the cult itself, having his family transformed into them. It's not much experience, but the cult are notoriously reclusive, so he's close to a world expert on them. Combine that with his childhood trauma and general depressed demeanour, and you can see why he's catnip for Pocketcat. In the so-called Rare's realm, when one has the magic spell Golden Gates, one can stumble upon a strange hideaway. The moon leering overhead with bloody bags and children's toys. Pocketcat's room. When Dan takes over the role, this room changes. A crime scene. Is this room their deepest desires? The feelings that they try ever so hard to escape from? Or perhaps it is their hobby room, so to speak. Pocketcat's hobby was children. Perhaps Dan's hobby will be dismemberment. The fight with Pocketcat in Terminus seems to suggest this. While you can fight Pocketcat before he takes over Dan, it's much more likely you will fight him afterwards. The original Pocketcat wouldn't fight you at all, but this new one insists on cutting off your limbs one by one, until you have none left. But only with permission, of course. He can't break the rules. Dan is mentally broken, close enough to Pocketcat to only need small tweaks, and, importantly, drenched in the blood of sulphur cultists. He's the perfect actor to take on the role of Pocketcat for the season of sulphur. Unfortunately for Sulphur, that's not how things went. He didn't get resurrected. The machine god siphoned his powers and glory instead, and will rewrite reality her own way. So what is Pocketcat's role now? He prepared for a play that was changed last minute. Well, out of anyone, I think he'll do fine. Charismatic tricksters always do. For the tail end of the video, one last recap. Pocketcat, the servant of the moon god Rare, is bound by his rules to not attack physically, but still tasked with interfering with any humans who try to ascend to godhood. He's a living story, a being similar to, but lesser than the old gods. These living stories have various methods of entering human reality, including possession. Pocketcat does in fact possess Dan, likely because his usefulness is ending in the upcoming age of sulphur. Rare, the moon god, shines the light of the green hue down on those below to scorch the land whenever there's a risk of a new god being born, and sends his minions out to stop it when he needs a delicate touch. This is partially revealed through the tale of the Pocketcat books, which aren't just fairy tales but stories of a past festival. Usually though, he's not inherently a bad god, even protecting humans who play along with the rules. The fact that humans' beliefs can affect the god means their beliefs shape reality, and Rare's light reveals the truth beneath it. Those burned by his light become moonscorched, changing themselves into what they think their true form is. And yes, they're right. It is the truth. The truth that Rare reveals is just what humans believe, even if they don't think they do. Was that everything? Well, if I missed something, you can just rewatch it. Now that you understand our furry friend better, now that he's been laid bare, his secrets extracted one by one and weighed on the scale, do you finally know why you like Pocketcat? One thing's for certain, he likes you. He likes you very much. Thank you very much for watching. You may have noticed something different about the channel today, a different name. Going forward, the channel will be known as Mythonics. The main reason is, nobody knows how to spell or pronounce my own name, More They Do, which is a big problem if you want people to find you. Don't worry, nothing else about the channel will change. It's going to remain the same creepy basement lore vibes. Well, there's no accounting for taste. I'd like to give a very special thank you to a very special artist, Jiro, who contributed the art for today's video. Their link is down below, so make sure to check them out. Remember that the best way to support the channel is through Patreon, where you can get video scripts, thumbnails, videos a week earlier than the public, and of course, your name in the credits. You've been watching Mythonics, hosted by More They Do. And remember, you're never alone in the dark.
Oh, hello there.